So I want to say welcome to everyone to another MassMEDIC virtual program. Thank you so much for joining us for this town hall. I'm Rachel Robinson, Vice President of MassMEDIC, and it's nice to see so many of you again. It's hard to believe we've been virtual for, I don't know, what, 18 months? Is that what everybody's going with? 16 months? We've all lost track of time, but I think we're all very hopeful for what's coming in the next 6 to 12 months. If we can keep everything kind of rolling along and variants at bay, well, we hope we'll be able to see all of you in person very soon. So we do have a great program today. I know I sent out a couple reminders about this, but it's been all over the news, and I'm sure that if you haven't been living in a vacuum or off of LinkedIn completely, or financial news, Bloomberg, you've understood there is definitely a wave of change in not just our industry, but the tech space overall, of resignations, people kind of understanding, coming out of the pandemic and looking and saying, what is actually important to me, and what do I value, and what have I learned from this last 15 months? And for some, it means a renewed purpose and vigor in the employment that they have. And for others, it's a look at something else. So we're really going to dive into that topic today. And I'm thrilled to have Holly joining us from the Mullings Group. But before we do, I do want to say just a quick thank you to all of our sponsors for the town hall programs. We couldn't do it without them. So Greenlight Guru, the Mullings Group, and QAD for being series sponsors, Toxicom, Zymedica, Boston Analytical, Haffey & Co., R&Q Solutions, NPR. Thank you all for supporting us in this endeavor and keeping our virtual programming going. We could not do this without our sponsors as well as our other programs. So thank you all so very much. So I will remind everyone that we want this to be as interactive as possible. Please ask questions. We will be doing a lot of time for Q&A at the end, and that is at the bottom of your screen. You can pop those into the Q&A section. And one quick just announcement from MassMEDIC. I'd like to introduce you all to Kayla, who is our Director of Community Engagement. Kayla Faskin joined us 2 weeks ago, and we are absolutely thrilled to have her here. So I wanted to give her a chance to say hello.
Hi, everyone. Looking forward to working with all of you. Thanks, Rachel.
So I think we're ready to kick into the meat of our programming with Holly. I'm going to turn things over to you, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say to get us started.
Thanks, Rachel, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here. Again, I'm Holly Scott. I'm the VP and partner at the Mullings Group. And for those of you who aren't familiar with our firm, we have been exclusively focused in search within the medical device, medtech, life science, health tech space for 3 decades. I've been with the firm for 24. So I'm pleased to be here and chat with you about one of my favorite topics, the state of medtech talent in this very unique time. So I'm gonna jump right in, and please let me know if you have difficulty hearing me or seeing anything. I'm going to have a screen. Can you see me, Rachel?
Looks great.
All right, excellent. So the state of medtech talent, here we go. Let's start with the term that has been buzzing around lately. This time period that we are in has been referred to and coined the Great Resignation. And where is this coming from? Well, the US Department of Labor reported a bold statistic that 95% of the workforce is currently looking or open to a new opportunity, looking to quit their job or open for a new opportunity. So that statistic, gets everyone's attention. And meanwhile, organizations like ours at the firm are experiencing business like we've never seen before. The demand for hiring talent is it's really unbelievable. And we are here to discuss what's going on. Well, the truth is, we're all in recovery, okay? In March of 2020, the COVID pandemic slowed us down, and many of us came to a screeching halt. Businesses, as well as individuals, were completely stopped. Elective procedures stopped, we entered quarantine. We didn't slowly fall into a recession. It was fast. It was literally overnight for many of us. And a dynamic that makes it dramatically different is there was an element of fear for health of ourselves, our family members, And in many cases, that was bigger than the economic brace that individuals were experiencing. However, businesses reacted very quickly. They rapidly made decisions proactively, and there were layoffs, there were furloughs, reductions in pay, and they braced for impact that it was impossible to predict what that impact was going to look like. I'm sure we all remember the conversations going something like, you know, we'll be in quarantine for a week or two until this slows down, maybe a month. You know, the reality was just completely unknown. So as these business decisions are happening, the individuals are coming to people like me and having these conversations about what they'd experienced, whether they're layoffs or reductions in pay, and they don't understand it because the impact of the business wasn't seen. And during these times is when you see the true colors of individuals. So as the leadership tried to navigate to the best of their ability, staying ahead of challenges, this left a lasting impression on many individuals that experienced and saw what others experienced during this time. And now that goes both ways. Not everyone walked away with scars. Some walked away with a stronger sense of loyalty and admiration. But the 16 months that we have all experienced has left some level of transparency and apparency of company commitment to individuals, as well as the team's commitment to the company. So as we look at this, you know, if we are truly in some kind of recovery period, what does this mean from individuals and in terms of talent? Well, this 16 months period, and Rachel hit on it earlier, everyone individually, from leaders of companies down to the workers, everyone has had time to reflect and evaluate priorities. The world as we knew it stopped moving. It was an incredibly different experience. No one has been through. I've been through multiple recessions. I've been through 9/11. Nothing equated to what we experienced. And this we had to figure out a way as individuals to keep putting one foot in front of the other and getting through this. We saw remote work being introduced and adopted, and there was some remote work prior to the pandemic, but this was jumping in full-fledged. And what we realized is that it is an efficient, productive mean for many businesses. And this was an idea that prior had not really been embraced. So this was something that became a necessity. The other piece that's changed is relocations have dropped dramatically, almost to no resignations at all. We've seen in the last 16 months, not only hires made sight unseen, but individuals that would historically have had to relocate for opportunities. It's not only a piece that's not being pushed anymore, it's actually becoming a negatively perceived item for an organization if they require it. As I've counseled individuals who aspire to the C-suite many times over my years, the old way of thinking was you really needed to prepare to relocate in order to grow your career. And that's just no longer the case. Now I'm counseling individuals that are building teams that if they require relocation, they're going to immediately lose a significant portion of that talent pool that is not willing to do so. They just don't have to right now. Flexibility and the ability to craft your own plan is not just a perk, this is now expected. So the way of the world today is there's some level of input that individuals want to give on where and how they're most effective. And then we're seeing, as we transition into the fall with variants and all of the dynamics that we're trying to navigate through, those that are returning to work in some capacity, those that are traveling for business, they're now being seen as having some different level of courage and leadership capability. So it'll be interesting to watch over the next year or so how these pioneers in this new normal end up in terms of responsibility and span of responsibility in the new normal. So I'm sorry, here, just 1 second. Let me get back to, here we go. Okay. So where are we today, and why are people considering moving? Well, at the end of the day, the perceived risks have been mitigated. Follow the money. There's an unprecedented amount of income coming into healthcare right now. Investments during the healthcare crisis have been unlike anything that we've experienced before. Yes, digital health is driving the majority of it, with an excess of 14 billion in 2020. And we've already exceeded 14 billion in July of 2021. We expect this investment is going to continue, and the investors are coming from everywhere in some capacity. Everyone has some kind of skin in the game. It started with diagnostic testing for COVID, PPE, ventilators, telehealth, but now we're seeing it continue in all arms of healthcare because the momentum is there and the sentiment is there. The intersection of tech and healthcare has never been more robust and more pinnacle. We are seeing exponential increases in funding opportunities, not just from televisit and remote health, but the integration into tech in every capacity. And it's creating basically a lower barrier of entry for new novel technologies of all sorts. So we expect this to continue. And exits for startups in the medical device, medtech environment used to really take two flavors. They were either going to get acquired by a big strategic, or they were going to try and do it on their own and build a commercial force and potentially go public. That's not the case. Now we're hearing of SPACs and special purpose acquisition deals and equity offices that are new to the game, private equity firms and partnerships that are really creating a lot of interesting opportunities. And where this investment and opportunity comes, creates more opportunity overall. The deal activity has exploded. So here we are. Sorry. Opportunity knocks. Money's flooding in, hiring's happening all around us, recruiters are calling, people are emailing us, there's things going on everywhere. And at the end of the day, we've survived a period which has made us stronger. And frankly, I hear individuals say that their perception of making a position change now is different because they feel they're in a better position based on their experience. They've realized perhaps priorities, all of that plays in, but they've also realized that they're tougher than they expected. And when you come out of battle, you're more equipped to deal with whatever life throws at you. The tenure of MedTech, an individual who stays with a MedTech company, has historically been fairly long. It's shrunk into like 3 to 5 years over the last 10 years or so. But now as tech comes in and technology culture blends with medical culture, we're seeing it shorten even more. So tech companies, you may see average tenure of anywhere between 1 year and 2 years. And MedTech was historically longer. So now you're going to see the tenure shorten, and it's going to continue to impact the transition times of individuals. And then lastly, on this point, what we've seen happen, and this was gaining momentum prior to COVID, but this is definitely accelerated with the last 2 years, is individuals are evaluating opportunities, not necessarily based on exclusively, is this something I'm going to enjoy doing? Is this people I'm going to enjoy working with, which are still big factors, but they're looking at what will I become from this experience? Where will my marketability increase so that I can actually move to the next level? And that seems like an interesting, position to be in. Are we actually going into an opportunity with the idea of the next, where we go after that? The answer is yes. Everyone's looking for growth and they're looking for build and they want to continue to evolve. And that can happen in your organization or if you decide to move on from there. So where does that leave us? If you think about retention, how do we keep our top players engaged? This is a lofty topic and one that, you know, we could have many, many meetings over, but the consistent theme is trust. So individuals who trust their leaders and leaders who trust their team tend to have higher rates of retention. The challenge with trust is it's not a light switch. It builds over time and it's built over action and time and foundation and reciprocity. So if the trust is broken, there's very little likelihood that we're going to be able to get that back, unfortunately. So that's something that we have to go in with our eyes open on. People stay if they believe in the mission. If we have a meaningful mission, individuals, especially in the life science industry, want to be part of something important and bigger than them. And that's coming back to be front and center, especially in the time of self-reflection that we've been through. Respect, a lot of talk, and of course, going back to 2020, George Floyd, a lot of really heated, emotional discussions going on in terms of respect in the workplace. Individuals as professionals, they want to be appreciated and they want to be heard. They're not looking for special privileges. It's really about ensuring that they are heard and that they have a voice. That's what people really care about. And that is a key to retention. Commitment to vision. It's interesting because, especially at the executive band, I'll hear an individual say, you know, I really like what we're trying to do here, but I don't have the resources to get it done. I don't have the support that I really need to do it. And it could be budgetary, it could be for whatever reason, but it creates friction and frustration. So if there's a vision and it's not communicated on how it's going to be executed on and bought into, I do realize and I do see frequently that can create a point and a gap where an individual starts exploring. Compensation, you know, we can't get away from this conversation without talking about money. Although it's not the primary reason that people leave or stay, it's a big piece. And as we're looking at retention moving forward, we have to understand that everything that is in the rearview mirror is dated because our market is evolving too fast to keep up with candidate demand. So we are not going to be able to rely on salary surveys. We're not going to be rely on exclusively internal parity in order to keep and attract new top players. Just like we all have experienced in some capacity in the last 2 years, supply and demand has been impacted. For instance, if anyone's done a construction project on their home or tried to buy a car or a bicycle, the supply chain is completely impacted by the ability to get goods. And those goods and services at demand have driven costs up. So we have to keep that in mind. If we're looking to engage and bring in talent and retain top talent, we have to consider compensation. It's the only way we're going to stay on top, or it's an important fork of it. It's not the only way, but it is an important fork of what drives people and what keeps people engaged. So how do we attract the players? We're going to experience some sense of attrition. We're going to experience turnover. I give you a visual here that you may have seen before, but I think it's pretty helpful. Our world is now one of which we are inundated from the moment we open our eyes in the morning to the moment we close them at night with a significant amount of information coming at us. The new currency is attention. Gary Vee, a media mogul out of New York, says that he day trades attention. That's what he does. He is a marketing guru, and he is not wrong. The world is full of day traders of our attention at this point. white noise comes at us. We pick up our phone, we see news, we see emails, we see texts. We have to very quickly make a decision on what we're going to pay attention to. So if we want to actually get lean in from individuals that are in the marketplace, we have to get their attention. We have to rise above the white noise here. We have to show who we are and tell our story in the public domain that's going to give them reason to pay attention. There are actions you can take to attract the players. There's externally facing actions, and there's also internally facing actions that will help your cause. The externally facing actions, coming back to our storytelling in the public domain, there are really 4 pillars that our organization talks about. When we're looking to engage a target market, we look at an organization and an opportunities leadership. We look at their market, the market that they're going after. We look at the mission of the company, and then the product itself. What is it we're looking to develop? And if you can craft a message around these pillars, it's a very good starting point for content creation on engaging the market and what they want to hear about. A second piece of this is your brand ambassadors. There are people in each company, no matter how small or how large, that do an excellent job at being a face or verbal representation of your brand in the marketplace. So tap into that. Who are they on your team? What can we do to get them in front of the right market and get lean in there? That is an important component, and it's one that you want to develop, because people like to talk about things that they like. And if they're happy at work, then they may be a really prime person to be a brand ambassador for you. The experience itself and the experience of interacting with your organization is one that you have to remember has a scalable response. And what I mean by that is, let's take the obvious. Let's take a hiring process, for example. If you have a hiring process and you're looking for one director level individual, you're going to make one hire. The chances of that one hire having a good experience are high. The other 100 that were touched in the process or more they're more important. They're the ones that you have to be more concerned about having a good experience. So if it's everything from interfacing with you at conferences to getting involved with the right search partner, whether it's your talent acquisition strategy or recruiter, that extension is part of your branding, and that is going to create a positive or otherwise buzz in the marketplace about who you are and what you represent. Internally, listen and learn to the team from your team members. Listening and learning, and it sounds contrite, but at the end of the day, individuality is really important. What is important to them right now? What do they see as a positive culture? Well, how you define it is totally different than how someone else might define it. Some people say happy hours are what it's all about. Others hate that aspect. They want to be more involved in training and development opportunities and really growing themselves. So listen to your team and create opportunities that allow them to grow. Because again, going back to the idea of who will I become, what will your opportunity allow them to become over several years' time? Who will they evolve to? Because that's the golden possibility for individuals. That's what they're growing towards. That's what they want. And the good news is, even though it seems odd to tee them up for their next opportunity, especially if it might be outside, you will get more out of them now based on that, based on reciprocity. I see it all the time where individuals will bleed for an organization because they are in turn getting what they need. It's no longer just clocking in, clocking out. They're giving all of themselves because they know that the organization is operating in their best interest. Developing those brand ambassadors we commented on. So the reality is, even though the market is unusually hot and there's a lot of money going into it, there may be individuals even on this call that are searching and looking for an opportunity, that are unemployed or unhappy and exploring. The bottom line is, unemployment numbers don't mean anything at the executive level. They operate at their own cadence. There's not really a fluctuation, so to speak. There's always a need, and they're often hidden opportunities. They're not advertised in the public domain. So we need to operate in, if you're at that band and you're looking and you're considering opportunities, a few things to keep in mind is you are your marketing organization. Again, going back to the visual, how are we going to elevate you? How are you going to elevate you above the white noise when it comes to getting the attention of the organization or individual within an organization that you're interested in engaging with? Start by creating a search plan. Who are you targeting? Why are you targeting them? What value can you potentially bring to the organization? And identify, engage, follow up, and be consistent. So keep a very detailed plan. Keep yourself organized on who, how, why, what you said, what the response was, because that is going to be the platform at which you can move from in terms of follow-up. And if you're like me and you're over 40, you probably don't love the media side that we've all been adopting here, as you can tell by my mad PowerPoint skills that I've been exhibiting here. But the idea is media is our friend, okay? Networking through media does not have to be scary and daunting. There's a lot of opportunity for it. You can network at scale, unlike anything else that we've seen before. And how do you do that? By following, liking, commenting, sharing. They're the new cocktail party. If you're engaging with a company, perhaps on LinkedIn, and you see that they've done something interesting, commenting, sharing, moving, and really engaging with value consistently, not just today and then don't do anything for the next 3 months, consistently, every week, touching in some way, that helps you be driven up in terms of their visibility to you. And that can create more opportunity for you to be found, should they be conducting a search, or you to be able to reach out in a more warm fashion to the individual who might be overseeing your particular interests. So what do we expect moving forward? So there's a lot going on in the industry, and from where we sit in our firm, we're very optimistic. First of all, it's a good market. We expect the health to continue. However, I will caution us on a few things. So first of all, follow the money always, right? Investment is a very strong indicator of market sentiment. And what I mean by that is where people put money is what they care about. If they're investing in digital health, it's because there's a serious interest in where that is going to impact our world in the coming years. So as you get marketable experience and as you're looking to create opportunities for individuals and attract individuals, that is an area that we want to stay front and center on. The other piece of this is the high number of deals and enormous investment will slow down. And we need to prepare for that. It's not a bad thing. It's a healthy part of leveling out. There's going to be a maturation and saturation that will slow down these investments. We'll expect this dip. And tech companies, for instance, they're going to realize that there's more to getting a product over the finish line in the medical device world and in the medtech world. And the clinical community may be more conservative than they expected on adopting new technologies, regulatory paths affecting the continuum of care. All of these pieces are adjustments and could be wake-up calls for these tech companies, because remember, they're putting in a significant amount of investment and they're going to look for an ROI. And when they don't get the ROIs as they want or expect, there's going to be a pullback. So we need to understand going in that the market there'll be some kind of adjustment. We do expect that the expansion and globalization of healthcare and value-based healthcare is going to continue to benefit us. There's been a real interesting harmonization and best practices sharing amongst global forces, and we expect that to continue to create great opportunities. We can learn based on other organizations that are doing things very well and things that are not working. And with that said, you know, the medtech industry is we expect it to be robust and create opportunities for years to come. We got into this business 30 years ago. You know, as mentioned, I've been in it almost that long, but because we know that the quest for higher ground and the quest to take care of patients worldwide is not going away. And with that, even though there will be ups and downs, we expect that health to continue. So with that said, I thank you for your attention, allowing me to raise above your white noise for a few minutes and open the floor to questions. I'll allow Rachel to drive that. And
Thanks, Holly. That was awesome. I do have a couple of quick questions to kind of get started, but I strongly encourage people pop them in the Q&A and we'll absolutely take a look at them. Also, you can raise your hand if you want to ask in real time and I can unmute you, whatever is more comfortable for everyone. But I think the one thing that first there were a lot of things that stuck out, Holly, but I did want to touch a little bit on what you mentioned early on in the presentation about folks that are returning to office full time, potentially being seen as, I don't know, a badge of courage, more dedicated, more in, you know, in it for the company versus themselves mentality. And that's concerning a little bit, at least from my perspective, when it comes to the perspective of working parents, right, who need to stay at home to take care of kids, but they're working just as hard as their counterparts. Folks who can't afford to relocate to big cities in order to be able to achieve a higher pay rate and be in an office full time. So, I mean, how do we protect against the mentality of being in the office is more dedicated and more in tune with the company's needs? Because I feel like that was really a thing pre-pandemic as well.
It's a tough one. I'll give you my thoughts, whether they may not be widely admired in this case, because there's always going to be some sense of Darwinism, right? In terms of, you know, the fittest are going to win. And because we're coming out of an era that is unlike anything else, and because businesses have had to make decisions and leadership within these businesses have had to make decisions based on limited information in front of them, they're making decisions moving forward based on limited information. So I don't believe we can change how we can't change how it's going to unfold. But if we are to protect those who are in the positions of which they can't be the person raising their hand saying, I'm going to jump on a plane or I'm going to do these things, I would say to the very best of your ability, be everything else. Be the brand ambassador for the organization. You know, if you really want to continue to grow and you want to protect your remote life, if that's what we're referring to here, you know, and you don't want to go back to work, you don't want to go back to travel, then in the public domain, be the spokesperson, be the person that doubles down on projects that you can do in other means. And this is where competition comes in. And in business, there's always some level of competition when you talk about progression, development, raises, new opportunities, promotions. So we can only protect to a certain extent. And there will be trade-offs. There will be, you know, but I would definitely encourage those who are concerned about others walking into an office and doing what they can't do to think creatively about how can I add value to this mission? How can I be the business person and add value to this company that I want to continue to grow with in a different way?
Yeah.
If you can think creatively and add value in a different way, that's going to, because again, we're all in a new space. This is brand new for all of us.
Yeah, those are great comments. You know, the thing that comes to mind for me though, based on that is if I have a health condition, or if there's something where I absolutely agree with you, add value, show your skills, help them understand what you bring to the table. But if it were me, I'd also be looking at companies that didn't ask me to do that and didn't value that over. And that also is going to be an issue, I think, for a lot of med tech companies, where they're going to look at other organizations that aren't asking that and placing the value on that. So I absolutely agree with you, but there's definitely both sides of it as an employer and an employee. So it's a tough one.
No, and what you're referring to is cultural, right?
Mhm.
Because what you're referring to is top down. It is embraced. Let's say in this instance that it's embraced for you to be back in the office. It's embraced. That's what leadership wants of you. And that is, for whatever reason, given more precedence to your production than individual production. And if that's ingrained in the culture and that's the direction of it, then you likely can't change it. So there are cultures, and they're growing. There are organizations that are taking on the culture of having really a wall-less office. They have no office. You have no office to go to. You are independently brought in, and you are in charge of creating your best productive environment. So that's where we're at, Rachel. You're going to see some of these trends and these watch outs as we're looking at retention and we're looking at talent access. These watch outs we bring to light here today, because we're going to be on one side of that, one way or another.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move on from that, and Peter, I'll unmute you in 1 second for your question. We did just get someone, kind of asking a little bit about company culture, right? And is that something that's are you hearing from organizations that they feel remote work is hurting company culture? I've heard of things that companies have done to try to virtually strengthen that company culture, but is company culture, corporate culture, an antiquated concept? Is that something what are you hearing on that?
That's a really interesting point, because if I were to comment on the general tone of culture, companies are more concerned with it than individuals in terms of development. Individuals want to have a positive work experience. They want to be effective. They want to do what they're hired to do. They want to interact and enjoy each other's company, but they don't necessarily need more than that. And the culture is there. You can't really create something if you don't start from the beginning. So what we've seen is, in the last year or so, it's been, what has this done to our culture? Are we different? Are we losing something? And those that are losing something are doing something to try to pull that together. So if being in the office and having weekly meetings, if there's that touch point becomes part, and it's been missing, then it's something that needs to be addressed. But where there's a disconnect is when the employer feels that culture needs one piece and it's not important to the employee. That's where the disconnect is being, and all of the places to hide are gone now. We are operating the way we're operating, and it's being watched by everyone within the company. So
yeah, that's good questions. Okay, Peter, you can go ahead and ask your question. You might still be muted though, so take yourself off mute. Oh, did we lose Peter?
I see him on there. There he is.
My hand was raised by mistake, sorry.
Oh, no worries. Well, if you have a question at some point, you are now allowed to talk.
You know me, I will at some point. Sorry.
I figured. Okay, so maybe let's go to a couple Q&A questions that came in from the audience. Let's hit this one from Greg first, and this is a really good question, something that is Greg, I completely understand, coming from working in product development firms before this. For folks that work at medtech firms that require hands-on engineering and really need that in-house collaboration, what are some other strategies to overcome the remote work expectations and relocation hesitancy? So have you seen anyone get really creative, Holly, if they know they have to have people in the office? What are some creative ways that people can entice? And other than compensation, because compensation is obviously one, it sounds like listening and culture, whatever that means for that organization. But have you seen anything really creative?
The theme that I've seen that appears to be working is allowing the team to help drive it. So in other words, so if you have an R&D, because this is happening everywhere, and if we have an R&D team that has deliverables, and if you're reverse engineering those deliverables and you're looking at what needs to get done, and that involves time in the office, there's simply, if you're going to carry your weight, Ms. Engineer, Mr. Engineers, we're going to need to get together on these points. Now, the in-person meetings are happening. People are either showing that they're vaccinated or wearing masks. I mean, they're doing it. It's happening everywhere. And there's no question of that. And there's only so much you can do in those cases. There are many, many roles that are not effective in a remote situation. However, the relocation, we have seen more commuters and the acceptance of commuting more long-term than we have before. So that's a piece of it. But you have to talk through the impact of that long-term. If someone's 35, owns a home, has 2 young kids, and they're commuting, that gets old really quick, and it's very taxing on the family. So there has to be a reasonable consideration for what that's going to mean, not only for output, what we need output wise, but also what you need from you personally. And then it becomes trade-offs for the individual. There's only so much we can do.
Yeah, it seems like what you said, I think makes a lot of sense. If you're asking them for something that they're unwilling or uneager to do, a way to combat that is to make them feel more empowered and more responsible for the output of what they are doing, right? There are ways to make your teams feel as though you are not asking them to do this because you don't trust them. You're asking them to do this because it is vitally necessary, and that is their mission. They're driven to do that, and they have the responsibility and the opportunity to make this successful. And it's on them if they'd like to take that on. I mean, that seems like that's a really good idea, and something that companies should be doing anyway when they empower employees.
Agree. Yeah. If it all comes back to the notion of it, if it's your idea, you're going to be more apt and committed to it. If someone's telling you something, you have to evaluate whether it's true for you or not. And if someone says to you that they can be equally as effective without being in the office, but you can point to a reason why you can't, then it becomes like an engineering challenge. It's data driven. So that's what I'm seeing happening, is these real-time conversations, because here's how it starts. We want you to come back to the office. We don't want to come back to the office. Are you sure you don't want to come back to the office? This is why we want you to come back to the office. Let's talk about what we're trying to get done. And if we talk about what we're trying to get done and you don't want to come back to the office, how do you expect that we're going to be able to get this done without that happening? So that's where are coming. And look, you're going to have a certain portion of the population that are going to make decisions that are not in line with our goal. They're going to move on. They're going to get into a situation where regardless, you still have you have a function. You have to get the project out the door. You have to get your work done. And if they're not willing to do it, then maybe it is best that they move on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wanted to share, because you mentioned in the presentation something about trusting your company to have your best interests at heart. One of our medtech companies mentioned during the pandemic that they sent a survey out, and it's a relatively large company, to their employees because they wanted to gather that information. I highly recommend all companies do it. You may not like the responses that you get, but you will get a huge understanding of the people that are working for you and with you, and really gauge how the conversations are going to be received, right? If your employees think that you are doing things, but you have their best interests at heart, not just the organization, but individually, and sometimes even just asking the question gets them thinking that you care, right? It comes back to being listened to. And if we want to keep top talent in this industry, we cannot afford to let people walk away because they feel like they're not being heard.
Yeah, if we think of it, if you think of the last 16 months in some way, if anyone's parented a teenager on the call, think of it as parenting teenagers. Teenagers need to figure out what's going to work for them. And they don't want to be told what's in their best interest, right? They want to figure it out on their own. So if you can listen and be there and help shepherd them along to make decisions that are in the overarching best interest of the family, the company, the goal, you're going to have a much better rate of buy-in. Now, it doesn't work for every function. I can only speak to the game I play, which is individuals who are earning in excess of 100,000 a year on average. You know, these are individuals who are intentionally in their career of choice. So the more empowerment of those individuals tends to get better results. There's going to be exceptions to the rule, but
Yep.
in that case, just things to think about.
So before we've got about 10 minutes left for a couple more questions, and there's one more from the audience I want to cover, but are there any industries that you think outside of medtech that are doing it well, right? Medtech seems to be a bit of and not to wrinkle anybody's fur on the back of their neck. Medtech seems to be a little bit of a follower at times, especially when it comes to the way companies are run, right? I mean, tech usually leads the foray with, unlimited vacation, endless X, tons of snacks, right? Like we tend to kind of adopt some things, but not everything. And it takes a little bit to get there, work from home. So are there any industries you think are doing it really well where MedTech should take a strong look and say, okay, what are they doing and what's reasonable?
Well, okay, so I'm biased. I'm in the best industry in the world. So healthcare and medical and this space, I still strongly believe does it really well because for the most part, we're mission centric. So mission centric is to me more important than foosball tables and snacks, and all those snacks are really important, I will say. But at the end of the day, I think we have most of it. I think we're doing a lot of it right. I think that the idea of flexibility and having more progressive leadership is important as we look towards the future, because as we bring in talent from, you have to think now that the individuals that are graduating now and entering the workforce, they have been pummeled with STEM education, with computer science, with IT. This is what they need to do. So they are tech savvy and they're tech prepared already. So if we think of the future A players, they're going to come with some kind of tech acceptance and level of understanding. And what that means to us culturally and how we can learn from that is tech has done a lot of things well. They are front runners when it comes to limitless vacation and flexibility and paternity benefits and lots of really neat things that create stickiness when it comes to long term. But the flip of that is tech still experiences the fastest rate of turnover. So they still have the shortest tenure. So take the good from each, right? Mm-hmm. And try and incorporate into where we're at. And in the med tech and healthcare industry, it really does come back to leadership. It does come back to what is our corporate leadership going to to reflect, speak to, and their actions. What are they going to back up so that we can drive and maintain the culture and the talent.
No, great. That's good to know that you feel like Medtech does it well. I do too, but I often kind of look and say, okay, well, snacks are really nice and not everybody has the snacks. Startups get the snacks.
And because of the regulatory path, there's a lot about it that's slower, and it's slower to adopt. And if you look at doctors' offices, are still using fax machines and CD-ROMs that none of us even have anymore. So, there's a lot about it that is disconnected and antiquated. But in terms of what other areas are doing it well, we have to take bits and pieces. We have to really look at it and incorporate it. But we don't want to lose our mission. We don't want to lose our patient focus. If we do that, then we start falling off. And I've seen that happen with businesses. Once they take their for-profit mantra and forget about the impact, you end up with people who just show up to work every day and check the box.
Yeah. No, I love the mission driven. That's absolutely an excellent point. Okay, so we got one kind of last question from the audience. And I'm just going to kind of summarize. Are you seeing anything new and interesting from a requirements perspective, both of what employers are searching for and what employees are offering or asking for? So has that kind of dynamic changed? Obviously, the work from home or remote is important for some, but not for others. I would imagine, benefits have probably all stayed about the same, but are you seeing any particular, either from they need to be able to do X, which wasn't a thing before, or we really want to have this opportunity when we're taking on a new position from an employee perspective?
So the big ones are the work from home flexibility and where, we had a joke in the office a couple of weeks ago, and we had an individual that was considering a role, and it was shared with them that the requirement was that they needed to be in the office 5 days a week. And her response was, "Oh, they're one of them, they're one of them." And it was like, that sentiment kind of tied it all up, because it's an us versus them type of concept. So if there is the requirement to be in office, it needs to be positioned in context with, here's why it's important for us to have you in the office every day. Because I have roles right now that require you being in office. Yeah. There's good reason as to why it's important to be in office. And you explain that, and I think you're good. So the remote nature of it is something that is being asked. From an employer perspective, I'm not seeing, well, the employers are also asked, they're saying, here's what we expect on in office versus out. I'm not seeing much yet change, but I do expect some adjustment. I do expect salaries to go up. They will need to. Okay, that's as I hit on before. They will need to in the marketplace that we're in. It's supply and demand. It's just going to happen. You asked me about non-competes earlier.
Yeah.
And employment agreements. Before we started the call, we were chatting about non-competes, enforceability, and employment agreements. I believe you're going to see more individuals ask for documentation and what's going to be asked of them outside of the scope of work itself earlier in process. What are you going to ask me to sign in non-compete? What is that? Because that's going to weigh into decisions. And why is that a sticky point? Because as attrition gets higher and as turnover gets higher, employers are going to be tightening their belt, and they're going to want to enforce things that they may not have enforced before. So these are the pieces that we have to be thoughtful of. Mm-hmm. And I would expect some change there.
No, those are great questions. And I'm glad you touched on the non-competes. Obviously, that is, something that our members are regularly asking us about. We are trying to really gauge the landscape of how MedTech sees non-competes, if folks are moving away from it in more favor of trusting in NDAs and obviously tech protections and IP, and making sure that they're not prohibiting their people from taking other employment. They're just making sure that the technology stays internal to the company, obviously, and that's a tricky one as well. But you and I were also just talking about that beforehand, the public perception, if you do ask your employees to sign a non-compete and they leave and you choose to aggressively pursue them, even when you are maybe 100% in the right, I have not seen that go well in the tone of public conversation for the company, right? The tendency is always going to be for public discourse to come down on the side of the little guy, the individual who is now being, gone after by, whether again, they're in the right or not, a large company. And it's very, very hard to come away looking good as a company who does that. So obviously you've got to protect yourself, but you have to get creative.
That's right. Yeah. Now, I would encourage anyone who is considering making a change to individually, don't just take, oh, we're right to work state, or, oh, just take inventory of what you have signed, your employment agreement, and understand that that's an agreement between you and your employer. No one can protect you. This is a personal agreement. It doesn't matter if you're going to another company that has a great legal department. It's not their responsibility to protect you, even if they tell you they will. You have to be careful. And I don't want to scare you, because I will also say that I have, in 24 years, and I've seen very, 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 very tough calls on this, but I have never seen a non-compete be truly enforced. Never, even when they were held. So they're very difficult to enforce. But that doesn't mean just because they can't enforce a non-compete that they can't make your life hell. They can still fire off letters. They can still have you hire an independent attorney. They can still, rock your boat for a little while. So just know what you're getting into. And if you're in a situation where you're considering a highly competitive move, you're best to get legal counsel before you do anything further, before you get to offer stage. Know your rights, know your individual, know where you're at. It's a few $100s and it's worth it to know where you stand.
Yeah. We did have one last question. We've got 2 minutes. I think it might be really good just to touch on this quickly. It's a competitive market. How do you lock up a candidate, right? In most situations, you're not the only one that company, that person's talking to. What are some interesting strategic ways to get people to say yes as quickly as possible? Because it's in your best interest to stop the search and find the right person if you think that's the right person.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great question. And we've seen this before. There's been ebbs and flows of a few different skill sets and times and so forth. So number one, time kills all deals. Number one, time kills all deals. That's actually number 2, 3, and 4. Okay? So faster and shorter the process from start to finish, the higher likelihood that you will engage, ride the momentum, and land the individual of your choice. And you may meet Miss or Mr. Perfect in that first interview. And if you wait to see other individuals, know that you're running the risk of that individual making a move. Don't take it as a threat. Take it as educated information. So my recommendation is keep a swift and positive candidate experience from initial reach to decision. Have someone Sherpa the process that can stay close to that individual. It doesn't have to be an external partner like us, but it can be someone internal that is checking in with them, not just setting up the interview, but hey, how was your experience yesterday, Sally? You met with 5 people. I'd love to just see how it went. Those little touch points that other people are not doing are going to help you bubble up, and they're going to help you continue to reaffirm a positive experience. So time, focus on that candidate experience. And as you get towards offer, the offer at the end of the day should not be a surprise. Don't do the jack in the box offer. If you want to land a person that is of high interest, start having conversations early about what their expectations are. And you can have these conversations. I know that That's Just Legal might disagree with me, but you can have conversations about what we want to make sure we're not wasting anyone's time. Share with me a bit about where you're at compensation wise, because I want to ensure that we're in the right ballpark. I want to ensure we're on the same page.
Right, and they don't have to tell you where they are, they have to tell you what they're hoping for, right? I mean,
Yes.
hopefully you don't have to ask, what do you make? Obviously, Massachusetts will frown on that, but it's very easy to ask, what are you looking for in your next position? And that comes compensation, that's title, that's, benefits, that's everything. What are you hoping for in a new role? And let's talk about whether that's feasible or not.
Exactly. And the earlier you get to that,
Yeah.
not only will they appreciate it, and they'll appreciate the fact that you're individually dialing in, but it'll also make you better prepared, and expect that swing at the end, because when you start with someone in process, they may share where they're at, but it's like, a seesaw. The more interested they are and the more they see the workload, that number may shift a little bit on expectations. So don't be surprised and don't be turned off by it. It's just a reality of the process. But my advice on that is move swiftly, have a very positive experience, and know the dynamics, the mechanics of the offer as early as you can in the game. What they're coming from, why they're moving, why are they interested in us, and what they're looking to do should they decide to move with you. Because if you can nail those things down, you're going to have a much better likelihood of landing.
Wonderful. Holly, thank you so very much for even taking a couple extra minutes to answer questions. I know that this was incredibly helpful for me, and I know the audience got a lot of it. So thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for allowing me to, and I really appreciate it. If anyone has any follow-up questions, feel free to email me and either through LinkedIn or Holly at Mullings Group. Happy to answer anything.
And we'll make sure everybody gets a copy of the video so that you can kind of review some of this. But everyone, thank you so much for joining us and sticking with us for the hour, and have a great rest of your day. And I hope to see you again soon.
Thanks.